Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2020 Wisconsin Ability Summit. Manpower Group is pleased to be a virtual sponsor for this year's event. I am Christopher Rowland, the Global Diversity Officer here at Manpower Group, a company that believes in the human potential of all. As a global organization operating in over 70 territories and regions across the world, our stakeholders are really naturally diverse. And we value the broad range of perspectives and capabilities that diversity brings. Um, we also foster inclusion and equity, trust and respect, acceptance. And we know from our vast knowledge of labor markets across the world that it is imperative to include all available talent and to ignite that human potential if we are to build sustainable communities that prosper across the world. And so we're thrilled to partner here today, to be a partner of Disability In, to live those core values right here in our own backyard in Wisconsin. But before we get started today with an amazing, powerful lineup of speakers, Disability in Wisconsin would like to recognize and thank its member organizations of their affiliate. Charter members include Associated Bank, Wrangham Consultants, Freighter and Medical College of Wisconsin, Kuna Mutual Group, Old National Bank, Kalahari Resorts and Conventions, and University of Whitewater. We would also like to thank those sustaining members: Franklin Energy, GE Healthcare, Manpower Group, Rockwell Automation, Northwestern Mutual, ABB, Oshkosh, Train Technologies, and Kimberly Clark. And of course, we can't forget our business and community members. And so we'd like to recognize Wallow Brands, Versatile Interpreting Services, Mindshift, My Choice Wisconsin, Easter Seals Southeast Wisconsin, Goodwill, MCFI, Best Buddies, and ERI, Employment Resources. And last but not least, I'd like to thank our sponsors for the session here today: Old National Bank, Wrangham Consultants, Northwestern Mutual, Oshkosh, Franklin Energy, Train Technologies, CAI, Autism to Work, Kimberly Clark, and Freighter and Medical College of Wisconsin. To all of our partners and sponsors, again, thank you for all that you do. Looking forward to a powerful session here today. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to Becky Kakula, Director, Disability Equality Index.
Unfortunately, Chris was unable to be here live today due to being selected for jury duty. He had previously pre-recorded his opening remarks. So now we'll transition to Becky, Director of Disability Equality Index.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I just wanted to thank everyone who's been involved in this process, planning this amazing event. I am Becky Kakula. I'm the director of the Disability Equality Index at Disability In, the national organization overseeing the affiliates. And I've been in this role for about 3 years now. I myself identify as someone with dwarfism who's proud to be part of the disability community. I struggled to find my first job after receiving a college degree, and I do this work now to help prevent that from happening to people like me in the future. So thank you all for being here and for your interest in this work. I want to start off by talking about the Are You In campaign that Disability In launched in honor of the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act this past July, but we continue to grow the campaign, and so far we have 26 CEOs who've committed to advance disability inclusion in their organization through participating in tools like the Disability Equality Index. And you can go to ruin.org to continue to see the growing list as we announce new companies over the time, including companies based here in Wisconsin. So investors, in addition to CEOs, we have 25 investors that have committed to holding the companies who ask them for money accountable for advancing disability inclusion and engaging in tools like the Disability Equality Index. So this growing list can continue to be found at disabilityequalityindex.org. A little background on the Disability Equality Index for those who may not be as familiar with the tool. It is a self-assessment that companies take to benchmark their disability inclusion practices. It's targeted for companies with 500 or more employees, but the questions live out in the public domain, so any companies who are smaller than having 500 employees can take the questions and apply as they see fit. We're going into our 7th year in 2021. It started out as a pilot in 2014, and we continue to grow participation. In 2020, we had 247 companies, and over 150 were part of the Fortune 1000. The ultimate goal is to get the Fortune 1000 to participate, and we would love everyone's assistance. The Disability Equality Index Best Place to Work logo is an honor that companies receive if they score 80, 90, or 100. They're named Best Place to Work for Disability Inclusion. It helps them attract future customers and future employees with disabilities. Those companies who participate and score below 80, nobody knows that they participated. We do not announce your name anywhere. We have your confidentiality, and we take pride in making sure that we assist you as you're getting started on your journey. And we want you to participate, even if you don't think you're going to be a top scoring company right away. It allows you to build a roadmap and plan out the future and figure out where you can improve when it comes to including people with disabilities in your workplace. We have a strong partnership with the American Association of People with Disabilities. They've been our partner since the beginning of this tool. Ted Kennedy Jr., who lost his leg to bone cancer many years ago, is a strong advocate, a disability rights lawyer, and he happens to be the board chair of American Association of People with Disabilities. He's been a huge help when it comes to getting those investors and CEOs committed to really making sure that disability inclusion is a priority. This goes into a little bit more detail about the DEI. It's an annual benchmarking tool, so the 2021 DEI will measure calendar year 2020. It's meant to educate the business community on disability inclusion best practices. This is the one area where corporations, even in the same industry, are coming together to try to solve the unemployment rate problem for people with disabilities. They're sharing best practices in the same rooms. Over 150 Fortune 1000 companies participated in 2020. It allows companies to figure out where they have room for growth, and it measures 6 key areas. The one area that is not weighted, meaning it does not count toward your score, it was introduced in 2019. It was non-US operations. The other categories, other than culture, everything is 10 points. Culture is 20 points because we really think that it is important to start with a disability inclusive culture before you're able to do anything else to advance disability inclusion. This goes into a little bit more detail of the points distribution and the different categories. So culture is really about making sure disability is included in your diversity and inclusion statement. Having a disability-related employee resource group, a disability hiring goal, and an engagement survey where people have the ability to self-identify. Then leadership talks about What are people doing who happen to be within 2 levels of the CEO? Do you have senior executive allies? Are senior executives being held accountable in their performance evaluations to include people with disabilities in the workforce? Is there a diversity council where disability is discussed? Enterprise-wide access. This is about building accessibility and website accessibility, making sure you implement plans for both areas. Employment practices, benefits, making sure there are benefits that can help people with disabilities feel protected in the job. Recruitment, making it known that people can ask for an accommodation from the application to the interview to the onboarding process. Employment, education, retention, and advancement, making sure that people with disabilities have an opportunity to move up within your organization. Retention and advancement programs, making sure you communicate that they're open to employees with disabilities and have them in your statement as well. Accommodations. Do you have a centralized accommodations fund? Do you have an accommodations policy, a procedure? Do you track accommodation metrics? What you will find out is accommodation costs aren't as much as you may assume. Most accommodation costs are less than $500 according to the Job Accommodation Network, and having a centralized fund, it will allow you to figure out what people are asking for accommodations for, and sometimes it may be ergonomic needs, and those people may not even identify as having a disability. So you find out a lot of great data if you have a fund that prevents managers from refusing to hire someone with a disability who may ask for accommodations. Community engagement. Are you engaging in the community? Are your employees learning about disability inclusion? Are you putting together focus groups across disability to make sure you're understanding the needs of all types of disabilities? Supplier diversity. I know Disability in Wisconsin is building out a great supplier diversity program. You have a lot of certified disability-owned businesses that are in the network, and we're really encouraging more disability spend when it comes to supplier diversity, not just stopping at the other areas of diversity. And non-US operations. For those companies who have operations outside the US, the rest of the tool is specific to filling it out on behalf of your US operations with over 500 employees, but non-US asks if you have operations outside the US, do you have non-discrimination policy that includes the word disability outside the US, and do you have an employee resource group related to disability outside the US? Usually if people say yes to the culture question around a disability employee resource group, they may be motivated to build one outside of the US. Congratulations to the Wisconsin-based companies who are among this list of top scoring companies from 2020. So these are the top scoring companies in the 100 category. Then we have the 90 category and the 80 category. All of these logos and this full list can be found at disabilityequalityindex.org. I just want to go over some highlights from the 2020 DEI. Over the course of the DEI, the number of employers has increased from 48 to 247, with a total workforce of over 11 million people. In 2020, 5.5% of employees identified as having a disability, compared to 3.7% in 2019. 3.5% of new hires identified as having a disability compared to 3.2% in 2019. And 205 of the top scoring businesses out of the 247 scored 80 and above, meaning they were a top scoring company in 2020. Now with the international data from the non-US operations non-weighted category, 75% of participating DEI companies in 2020 said they have operations outside the US. Of the non-US based employees, 186 companies who said they have operations outside of the US have a workforce of 7,496,147 people. 75% of multinational companies reported operations outside the US have a disability inclusive standards of non-discrimination in the workplace, compared to 69 in 2019. And then 42% of multinational companies also report their non-US operations have a disability ERG, compared to 41 in 2019. And all of this information can be found on the Disability Equality Index website, where you can download the full DEI report. And I'm going to go into a few more details from that report in the next few slides. We identified the areas of success. So this is a compilation of the data from the 247 companies that participated. In culture, out of the 97% of businesses with the diversity and inclusion statement, 85% of them specifically mentioned disability. In leadership, 88% of businesses with a diversity council have a member who is openly public about their disability and/or an ally or supporter for persons with disabilities. One way to display this is getting leaders to get engaged in this work and have allies. Enterprise-wide access, 70% of businesses have an accessibility expert. They could be someone who's internal or external. In accommodations, 94% of businesses have a written disability accommodation procedure that allows people to understand how to request an accommodation. In recruitment, 89% of businesses are focused on external recruitment efforts and hiring people with disabilities. It's really important when you're thinking about this external recruitment effort, when you're talking to colleges and universities, make sure that the career centers are talking to the disability services centers, because you want to make sure that people with disabilities in the schools are being considered for jobs. Community engagement, 95% of businesses have provided philanthropic support to external disability-related organizations. In areas for improvement, 64% of businesses have a company-wide commitment to digital accessibility. This is compared to 59 in 2019. In benefits, 69% of businesses have mental health benefits above and beyond what's required by law, compared to 62% in 2019. And with this question specifically, I know mental health is a big topic these days. It's very important to think about other ways outside of what's required by law to support your employees, especially during times like this. And in accommodations, 60% of businesses are tracking accommodation metrics compared to 53 in 2019. Companies who have a centralized accommodations fund can track metrics a little bit easier than those that may not be able to. For employment practices, 72% of businesses with employee retention and advancement programs have programs focused on employees with disabilities. It could be a women's leadership program. You just need to make sure that you say that women with disabilities are eligible to apply to this program. Supplier diversity, 64% of businesses with public-facing websites list organizations like Disability:IN, who's the certifying body for disability-owned businesses, a 10% increase from 2019. In non-US operations, 75% of the 75% of businesses with non-US operations have non-discrimination policies that include the word disability applying to employees outside the US. Opportunities for growth. So this is where all of the companies have room for improvement. In culture, 95% of businesses use a company-wide employee engagement survey, but only 38% review the data for employees who've identified as having a disability. 88% of businesses have a diversity council, but only 65% have a mission that includes disability inclusion. Enterprise-wide access, 60% of businesses have a web accessibility policy, but only 56% of them are auditing their internal sites. It's important, especially when you go down the journey of web accessibility, to think about your external and internal websites in the same way, because you want your internal websites to be accessible so employees can have access to them. And sometimes it's the employees with disabilities who can help be the solution to help you make those sites more compatible. In recruitment, only 45% of participants ask all candidates during the interview scheduling process if they need a reasonable accommodation. I'd like to see this number go up. I think it's very important to put it out there when you're setting up the interview, the date, time, and location, whether it's on the phone or over email. Make sure that you make it known someone can ask for an accommodation so they feel empowered to do so. Supplier diversity. Only 25% of businesses have a company-wide disability-focused goal in supplier diversity. Hopefully we can see that go up because it is a goal after all, and companies can figure out how to work there after they set the goal. In community engagement, 62% of businesses have a smartphone app available for the public, but only 46% of them audit them for accessibility. As we look forward to 2021, we're currently in the registration period for 2021 through January 29th, 2021. A few months back in December of 2019, we put together some groups to identify some areas in the DEI that have not been updated. We did a introduction of supplier diversity in 2018, 2019. We made some updates to some questions that were really important to the disability community. And then this year we decided we wanted to make some updates to categories that we hadn't really touched in a while to modernize them. And what we view as modernization is adding clarity to any questions that have already existed and are already weighted. And we added new non-weighted questions. When we add new non-weighted questions, it means they don't count toward your score for at least a year's time. So in enterprise-wide access, we added clarity to the existing 7 weighted question sets. So the intent is very similar to the intent in 2020, but we just wanted to add some additional clarity. And then we added 1 new non-weighted question about innovative technology. And in benefits, we added clarity to the existing 3 weighted question sets. There was a question about personal assistance services benefits, and we feel that it would be placed better in accommodations, so we moved that over to accommodations. It will remain non-weighted. Long-term care coverage, we removed that benefit, but we added 6 new non-weighted question sets. Supplemental long-term disability, vision care coverage, wellness benefits. So this is in addition to the mental health benefits, what wellness benefits may you be offering. Information about ABLE savings account plans or special needs trust, paid caregiver leave, and delivering benefits information to employees in accessible formats. There are several questions throughout the DEI where you have a procedure and then there's a question of, is this communicated to employees? It's very important to make sure that employees know how to access what you're offering. And you want to make sure that it's accessible. In accommodations, we added clarity to the 4 weighted question sets. One of the pieces of clarity we added was the centralized accommodations fund question. It can also be a budget line item where a manager is not penalized if they go over in that budget line because they're able to support an employee accommodation request. Then we added 2 questions around services for deaf and hard of hearing employees and flexible work options for employees with disabilities. I know in the times we're in, a lot of us have the accommodation of working from home, but we want to make sure when it is safe to physically go back in the workspace, there is an option for people with disabilities to still have that option, but maybe there are more people who may want to continue to work from home and they should be supported in that option as well. We just don't want to go backwards in physical or digital accessibility, and we need to have options because people may have different needs and requests. In supplier diversity, we didn't add any new questions, but we added clarity to 4 questions. So what happened was the 4 groups that got together, they were subject matter experts in these areas. They brought recommendations to the Disability Equality Index Advisory Committee, who came up with the original questions for the tool, and then those were approved and put forward as we plan ahead for the 2021 survey, which will open on February 1st. So registered companies have until January 29th, and then on February 1st, they'll be able to start filling out the DEI on the portal. They'll have till April 9th, and then we'll announce the top scoring companies at the national conference in July. These are additional resources for everyone to take a look at, and feel free to even just go to the disabilityequalityindex.org website. In the last bullet point, we have a portal for best practices where we continue to publish best practice reports based on information that companies submit underneath each of the categories in the DEI. Companies are allowed to submit up to 3 best practices related to that category. And then we work with the companies to figure out how to turn them into information that can be shared in reports. So we continue to encourage companies to share best practices as we build out more resources that can help you all learn from each other. And tonight, I hope that everyone joins us on Facebook or Twitter. Disability In is working very closely with Voya Financial and Mandy Harvey to put on a concert tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, and we want you to be there and join us. And we will also have some presentations, some announcements from some of the CEOs who participated in the Are You In campaign. So hopefully you'll join us. And this is my contact information for anyone who may want to reach out with any questions related to the DEI. And then these are some additional articles about the DEI that have been published in press. And now I'm really excited to be here with the people who are making it happen here on the ground in Wisconsin. They are the top scoring companies in Wisconsin, some of the top scoring companies that are being represented. And I want to learn about their journey with the DEI because I don't think anything's more important than hearing from companies themselves as they navigate this tool. It is a self-assessment after all, so you get what you put into it. And I'm just so excited to be here with all of these great people today. I'm going to start off by having you all introduce yourselves. I will call you off by name, but why don't you introduce yourself, tell me why this work's important to you, and make sure in your introduction you say where you work and how long you've been in that role. I'm going to start off with Amy.
Thank you so much, Becky. So pleased to be part of the panel discussion today. My name is Amy Perales. I'm Assistant Director of Product Management in the digital workplace at Northwestern Mutual. I am also a member of the Disability Alliance, ERG, which is an employee resource group that partners very closely with our diversity and inclusion organization here at Northwestern Mutual to forward and advance NM's commitment to creating a truly accessible and inclusive work environment. I've been a part of the employee resource group for 4 years now. I've been part of the council for the last 3 years and have partnered really closely again with our diversity and inclusion organization in submitting this DEI survey over the last 3 years. My passion for this topic really is rooted in the fact that I have a child with a non-visible disability. When he was younger, I was an advocate for him in terms of inclusivity with his peer groups and in the educational environment. And then as he entered the workforce, I observed the challenges that he encountered as an adult with a non-visible disability in gaining employment and maintaining employment. And so I quickly became an ally for him. And it really made me passionate about ensuring inclusivity for all, including not only those that are in my immediate family, but obviously trickled over into my work environment as well.
Thank you, Amy. I'm excited to have you here. How about you, Alyssa?
Hi, everyone. Alyssa Ryan Joy. I'm the business owner on CUNA Mutual's effort to modernize our workspaces, including our current construction of a new building on our Madison campus. I've been in that role since the beginning of this year, but been with CUNA Mutual Group for about 5 years. We've participated in the DEI for the last 2 years with a top score of 80% both years. My professional connection to that is that I was one of the founders of our Allies for Disabilities, ERG, about 4 years ago. And that was the group that encouraged CUNA Mutual's participation in the DEI. My personal connection to that group originally is that I identify as a person with a disability. I have a progressive form of muscular dystrophy and started using a wheelchair a couple years back. At this point, though, I've learned so much about people with various disabilities and disability inclusion in the workplace that it's definitely a passion area beyond my own personal interest.
Thank you. What about you, Juan?
Thanks, Becky. Good morning. Juan Bott. I'm a Human Resource Director at Frederick Health. We are an integrated health system. We serve southeastern Wisconsin. I work at our main campus. We are an academic medical center. We're one of 2 level 1 trauma centers in the state of Wisconsin. And we're the primary teaching affiliate with the Medical College of Wisconsin. So really thrilled to be here with the other members of the panel. What we do in support of people with disabilities is part of our mission of connecting with communities. It's part of how we operate. We at Freighted are charter members of Disability in Wisconsin. I sit on the board of directors for Disability in Wisconsin. We work with Project Search to employ people with disabilities, so it just really aligns well with what we do as an organization. This was our first year participating in the survey, so I'm delighted and happy to share what our experiences were. And then, as has been noted by the other introductions, there's a personal connection as well. I have a niece who just finished high school a year ago, and she has disabilities, and so her entry and participation in the workforce is something that I'm working actively with our family members on, because there's a lot that she can contribute, and that's part of the education process when we talk about opportunities for people with disabilities. So thank you for the opportunity to join today.
Well, thank you, Juan, and thank you for sharing that story. This is all about storytelling, and it really drives the work and the passion that we all have for this work. Tracy, how about you?
Yeah, Tracy Glorioso with Experis, a Manpower Group company. I have been with the Manpower Group line of businesses since it'll be 15 years this December, actually. And I am a director of operations for Experis. Our business lines work really closely with our D&I teams across the organization. I've been a part of our BRGs, as well as I'm on the board of Disability in Wisconsin. The personal connection is I have a personal connection. I also identify with a disability, as well as have family members. And the biggest thing with being a part of Disability in Wisconsin is getting the education out. I always grew up where you just didn't talk about it. And so it's extremely important to how we educate our organizations, how we educate individuals outside the organization. And so that's what I'm passionate about.
Thank you. I'm going to start with you, Juan, since this was your first year participating in the DEI. How much time did it take you to complete the benchmark?
Sure. So, we're blessed at Freighter, being a pretty large health system, to have resources who can help us participate in these kinds of surveys. And, as I noted, we're an academic medical center. So the work we do around measuring ourselves and benchmarking ourselves is something that we take very seriously, because we use it as a learning opportunity. So our team that worked on the survey, again, being the first year, there's a lot of setup time and really thoughtful planning that we do, understanding that if we're going to engage in a survey like this, we want to do it well out of the gate, because we're planning to participate for the long term. So the setup as far as strategizing, planning, ensuring we have the level of leader support that we need to effectively push forward the survey, which is something we're blessed with in terms of having that executive leadership at Freighter. Probably a good 10 hours to do the setup by the survey analyst. And then there's obviously additional work of connecting with the different departments on working on the survey, collecting the responses and collecting those responses in such a manner that we can quickly access them in future participation. So, I'd say easily double the time, beyond the 10 hours of setup, easily double the amount of time as far as collecting the responses. But understanding that, and I'm sure the others will share that, now having completed the survey for the first time, we obviously expect we'll find a lot of efficiencies through participation in future years.
Yes, and the great news is the portal allows you to pre-populate your answers from the previous year after you participate for the first time. There will be some of those new non-weighted questions for 2021, but there will be fewer questions you'll have to manually enter. But of course, as I'm sure Alyssa will let us know, you do want to make sure that you check all of the answers just to make sure everything's up to date. So Alyssa, tell me about your experience in completing and the timeline.
Yeah, definitely echo what Juan said, that, you want to get set up to make it easier for yourself the second, third, fourth time around. I think the first year we estimate it took around 40 to 60 hours between the person who aggregated all of the information and then the people who are running point in certain areas like IT, procurement, HR. Second time around, right, you can pre-populate the answers. But it's also easier for departments to just react to what you put in front of them at that point. And you can share what they had said the year before, since the questions are probably mostly going to stay the same unless you've made some improvements in some areas, which is always the goal. The timing, the other thing I wanted to share there is just decreasing the number of hours that it takes is a lot about accountability and timing and structure. So, giving folks a 2-week time frame maybe to get the answers back to you, and starting it with plenty of time before the due date.
Thank you. Amy, what was the most difficult aspect of completing the benchmark?
Yeah, so in addition to what Alyssa and Juan touched on in terms of the coordination and the organization that's required in a larger organization to bring together all the information that's relevant, I think, just secondary to that, I would say truly understanding the questions and the root of the questions and what they're asking and kind of what's in scope, right, for the question. And for us, we had a lot of ideas in the beginning around the work that we were doing, a lot of really good information that we wanted to share. But we had to go through a couple different iterations of that to make sure that we were landing at the root of really what the question was truly wanting to understand. And so it took a little bit of time to iterate through that to really land on something solid. And we were very grateful for the partnership with the organization, the different areas of our organization, as well as with your organization, to be able to support our questions as they came up. But that was probably, again, secondary to just the coordination in general, was just understanding those questions.
Yes, and thank you for making that note. And people can always reach out, and I can always share examples of how people have answered different types of questions in the past. But sometimes it is reading a little bit too much into the question when it may be asking for that first layer before you get to those next layers. Tracy, what are your thoughts?
It is nice that the survey pre-populates for your prior answers, but the biggest challenge, I would say, especially for a large organization, is you still have to validate that data. So just because you answered yes last year, or you had a specific verbiage or saying last year on a certain area, you should still validate that, because, especially with our organizations, as we change or as new individuals come into different groups, if something did change, or if we answered no, and we didn't realize that we actually made a change to now answer yes. And that's why it's extremely important to validate the information. I think, Alyssa, you mentioned earlier, just providing to each of the departments the areas that need to be answered. It almost makes you have to go back and revalidate. We also found out too, is sometimes the question might be just with the wrong group to answer it. So you might assume your people and culture team or your technology team needs to answer a certain question, and they come back with the answer no. But as an organization, you may be doing this. It might just be in the wrong hands. So really, again, making sure who's responsible for each of those areas and having a few different groups overseeing that, looking over the data. So it's not just a one-person project. It's definitely a collaboration amongst the teams.
Thank you. So Amy, back to Amy, was there any benefit in simply completing the benchmark?
Yeah, I think it allowed us to really look at and understand what are all the different criteria that the benchmarking survey is really looking to understand in terms of really looking at a holistic inclusion practice at an organization. For us, it really helped us pinpoint very specific opportunities for the organization. And I would say, when I say us, the organization as a whole, but I can even highlight our leadership team, our senior leadership team, as they explore not only looking at Northwestern Mutual and understanding where there's opportunities at Northwestern Mutual, but also in the broader community that Northwestern Mutual is so committed to, really seeing how can we engage both internally and with that community at the same time. It's been very helpful in helping us focus on both aspects of the inclusion practice and policies.
Thank you. What about you, Alyssa?
Yeah, I agree with Amy. There is a huge benefit in just completing the survey. So it's a great tool for advancing disability inclusion within your organizations. The connections, I mean, starting out, like the connections that you make with different areas in your organization where impact is possible, you get on their radar screen by completing this survey. So when you're going back to them to try to implement a change, they know you, they know what you're doing, and they also have seen it in a survey. So you get some guidance from an expert in disability inclusion, disability in. So we, obviously we have ideas about what we want to tackle as far as disability inclusion as a company, but we might be missing something. And so I think having that external partner really be able to say, these are the things that you really ought to be doing if you want to be inclusive to people with disabilities, even people with disabilities who don't yet work at your company. These are the steps that you need to take. So it makes, it gives that expert guidance. It also gives a business case, right? You all work with hundreds of companies. So it's great to have that experience there. And then the other thing I would just note is the connection to the Disability In network. For us, signing up for the DEI was our first connection to Disability In, and that partnership has been really valuable to us.
That's a great reminder that, so we did publish a report back in 2018 that I know a lot of you have seen in partnership with Accenture, proving that there is a business case, and those companies who are engaged in tools like the Disability Equality Index are doing better financially as well. So thank you for bringing that piece up. Now I'm going to go to Juan. Are there any examples of interesting insights that you can share from the DEI and what you learned while you were participating?
Yeah, thanks, Becky. I think I'd start by segueing off the previous comments about just participation in the survey is so great for giving you a new lens and really stretching your thinking. I think the survey is really well designed as far as really being comprehensive. I think Amy used the word holistic, and I think that's a great word. And it just really stretches our thinking, understanding that how we show up as an organization to our employees and the communities we serve can happen in so many different ways. I think sometimes the way we view engaging with people with disabilities starts through the employment process, and that's obviously a key part of it, but it's so many other things. So I'd start by echoing those previous comments. I'd say, one of the big takeaways that we need to look at, and I'm wearing my human resource lens, is, we're so prone, especially as big organizations, to build our processes for scale because that's easier and it's more efficient. But I think what we all have to do as organizations is really push ourselves. And we're so blessed in today's world to have so much technology available to us where you can configure processes differently without being an administrative burden. I think we all need to do a better job, starting with, I'm talking about Freighter, and I'm not preaching to the other organizations, but just doing a better job of how we think of our processes and understanding that while one size fits all can feel good and it's efficient, we can push ourselves to really present ourselves and build processes in such a way that's it's supportive of people coming from different perspectives and different needs.
Thank you. So Tracy, building off of that, we also got a question in the chat, and I thought maybe you could speak to this as well. Once you completed the survey, how did you prioritize action items to improve disability inclusion? So in addition to the insights, kind of how do you prioritize those action items?
Yeah, it's interesting because actually while we're going through the process of completing the survey, we know where we can't answer, right? And we know what we're missing. And so it's interesting because as we're meeting with the project team that puts our DEI together, is that when we find gaps and we see them, or we realize, hey, this was a gap last year and it's still going to be a gap this year, what are we going to do about it? And so it gives you that visibility so you can start prioritizing based on the needs of your organization, of how you can start putting initiatives within the organization to make sure that we are paying attention to certain areas differently or revisiting complete areas altogether. The other piece around just the insights is just because you are compliant as an organization, it doesn't mean you're necessarily inclusive. And I feel that the DEI toolkit is an inclusive toolkit to help your organization have that inclusivity across the board. So again, it's not about just checking the box, but what are you doing besides just checking that box? And I feel all the different components within the toolkit provide you those ability to do that as an organization.
Thank you. And then Amy, building off of that, how have you used the results of the benchmark?
Yeah, I think the question was how we use the results of the benchmark, if I heard that correctly. But I would say a couple things that we have, it has allowed us to do. I think the first one we touched on a little bit earlier, and I think was just reiterated by Tracy, and that is the organization really coming together and us partnering across all the different areas in the organization that have an interest in inclusivity in our organization, really helping us focus and align on strategically where we want to take the organization next. So again, in addition to knowing kind of where there are opportunities in very specific areas that are targeted through the questions, it's also looking strategically forward and developing a roadmap that really helps us be mindful of where we can have the biggest impact over the next year or 2 years as we move forward. The other thing I would say is it really allowed us to have outreach in our community with other companies that are also part of this journey. We took advantage of reaching out to other peer companies, and really understanding how are they able to move forward with the survey. What did they learn as part of their journey? And it really strengthened those partnerships and those peer relationships with other organizations. So two really strong results that immediately were evident through us participating.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I love sharing the story about how even after you received your results, you guys had some fun with the DEI Best Place to Work Award to really make sure the different departments could be aware of that honor and celebration. So thank you for going above and beyond and making it known that it's something that's important to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and just to expand on that, Becky, I think if for those who may not be aware or aren't privy to the story, we did, after we received the award, we did go and kind of tour the different areas of the organization that were key in contributing towards that, so we could share that award across the organization. That's what Becky's referring to.
I love that. Thank you. Alyssa, how have you used the results of the benchmark?
Yeah, so for us, it's been, two-prong, identifying any gap areas, and then also celebrating things that we're doing well. So it allowed us to point to areas that, we either low-hanging fruit that we could shore up and do something quickly, or areas where we needed to dig in a little bit more to achieve a more inclusive result. And yeah, I think, it's important to do that celebration part too, just like Amy said. So I think our ERG was very excited to see that come into place, and a lot of employees throughout the organization as well.
Thank you. Yes, the ERGs are a great place to build and drive the energy, and the ERGs can be very helpful when it comes to filling out the DEI and getting answers from a cross-functional team of people who are passionate about this space. So definitely keep the ERGs involved. I'm going to go down the row of what does a top score mean to your company, starting with Juan.
Yeah, thanks, Becky. It means a lot. I mean, it's very affirming, given that we're on this path, that we're doing things well. The comments on the BRGs, we similarly have BRGs focused on Black and African American employees, military veterans, LGBTQ and allies. We're launching a Latinx that actually I'm chairing, women in leadership, and then this is part of that plan is to have a BRG focused on employees with disabilities. So being able to use this information to launch that discussion, to measure ourselves, to help facilitate a conversation internally means a lot to us. Like I mentioned before, and I think the other panelists would agree, it's not just enough to participate, but we're looking for that top level of performance, because we're all our organizations are viewed with a lot of credibility and trust in the community. So we recognize the responsibility we have to be leaders, and so we're all trying to raise the bar. So we're excited internally and how we push this forward. We have great support from our Chief Diversity Officer, Andres Gonzalez, who's participating in one of the panels later this week. And so there's really a strong commitment starting with our CEO to really move things forward. And so we're excited to use the data in that way.
We're excited to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tracy, what does a top score mean to your company?
Yeah, I think, over the years as, Manpower has been scoring 100%, which sounds really awesome. At some point, it also makes us a little bit nervous because we know there's still improvement that we have to make. So the DEI is a tool, it's a progression. It's not a, hey, we got 100, we're done, we've checked the box, we're gonna get 100 all the time now. So we're constantly trying to think of new ways that we can continue to advance our organization to continue to be able to progress with the DEI. You talk about the new questions this year that are going to be weighted out there, or even the ones that you show that aren't going to be weighted in the DEI. We know eventually they're going to count for points, right? So you better make sure that as you are looking at your organization and putting processes in place, that you're thinking about those things. So getting a great score is awesome. We love to share it with our organization, but we also like to continue to plan on how we're going to continue to be able to improve to the next year. So that's always a focus for us.
Thank you. And you bring up a great point that 100 does not mean perfection. It means that you're on the road, on the journey for disability inclusion, but we will continue to raise the bar, and we're here to support you. And we want to make sure that you do make sure that nothing falls behind year after year, and you're checking those answers to make sure they continue to be accurate. Amy, what does a top score mean to your company?
Yes, we've received a 100 the last 2 years, and I think our head of diversity and inclusion at the organization says it best, and that it is definitely affirmation that we are on the right track, but it also is an opportunity for us to understand that we have a lot of work to do too as well. So just as the other folks on the panel have said, we know that we're challenging ourselves and others to raise that bar. I think Juan mentioned that earlier. We feel the same at Northwestern Mutual. We hold ourselves very accountable to advancing inclusivity in our workforce. And again, while a score of 100 affirms that we are on the right track, it also lets us know that we need to raise that bar year after year and keep getting better at making sure we have a truly inclusive work environment at our company.
Thank you. Alyssa, what about you?
Yeah, Tracy, I love that you said it. It makes you a little bit nervous. I think that there's definitely an element of accountability that comes with having a top score, which is great. That's great that you're saying that you're a top scoring company. You are, and you need to hold yourself accountable to that. The word that always pops into my head with being a top scoring company is that this is an important milestone for us. So for those of us who are doing the work of trying to make our company more inclusive for people with disabilities, it feels really energizing to have the company recognized as a result of those efforts. But like everyone else said, by no means an endpoint. I love that you continually reinforce, Becky, that 100 is not a perfect score either. I think that there's probably no company yet that's perfect in terms of disability inclusion. We live in a society where ableism and bias against people with disabilities has really been the status quo for much too long. So I think that's hard to dismantle completely, and we're all still on a journey at CUNY Mutual. That's what we're striving to continually work towards, a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplace.
Thank you. So now it's going to be lightning round of what's a piece of advice you'd give to an organization considering participating for the first time, starting with you, Juan.
I'll do two. Do it in a planful and thoughtful way with the mindset that you're going to do it for the long term. And then to the best of your ability is gather that internal support by executives and champions who can help you either remove barriers or push things along when necessary. So those would be my 2 words of advice.
Thank you. Tracy?
My biggest thing is to collaborate, and not just internally, collaborate with your external peers as well. Any of us that are on this call, reach out to us, ask us questions. I think the best way to be able to become more efficient and just to get better is to ask questions and to find best practices. And those best practices might not be in your organization. So reach out to your peers in the industry and ask them what they're doing. And if they're not doing it, if you guys, there's a way you can collaborate and talk about ideas together.
Thank you. Amy?
Yeah, I would say allow plenty of lead time is the first bit of advice I can offer. Definitely do not back yourself up to the deadline for submission. It does take time, especially in your first year. And then another recommendation would be create a cross-functional group, especially for larger organizations, having many individuals come together so that it doesn't land on any one or two people's plate, but that it really is truly collaborative effort across the organization will be very helpful, especially again in your first year.
Thank you. Alyssa.
Yeah, so I would say make sure that you have a point person and give them the time to do it. And it's helpful if that person knows the organization really well. So maybe has a longer tenure, has been in roles where they understand which areas do what, because that's not, a natural for every single person. And the last thing that I would say is just making sure that it lands in the right place. So I caution with any, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives against having it land with the people who are most affected. So like within your disabilities, ERG or BRG, making your company more inclusive to individuals with disabilities is everyone's work, not just the work of employees who actually have disabilities.
Amen. And now I hope
Hey,
you're
Becky.
ready.
Becky, this is
Did you
Juan.
say one more thing?
Yeah, I'm going to cheat here, but I am going to add one more thing, and I'd say for the participants, it's don't sleep on Becky. Meaning, I don't know of many surveys where you have such a passionate and well-informed thought leader who will make themselves available to help you participate. I know I'm speaking for the other panelists that you're a great talent, Becky. I've heard you speak. You've spent time with me one-on-one, and so it's not often that when you're participating in surveys like these. That you have that kind of access. So I know, Becky, you would make yourself available to anyone who's considering it and really help them through that process. And so I just want to call out you and recognize you. And I think we all, would echo the same sentiment.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. I really enjoyed this and hope we can take this on the road and do many more together in the future. I hope that everyone's ready to register. If you haven't already, you can go to disabilityequalityindex.org/register. And as everyone said, I'm here for you every step of the process. And don't forget, tonight's the Mandy Harvey concert. We hope all of you can join on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Just go to Mandy Harvey's pages. And now I'm going to put it over to Kate.
Thank you, Becky, and thank you all the panelists. A lot of great learning and experience today. So this concludes our session for today. I want to thank all the participants for being here today. Please take a few minutes, if you could, to take the survey that will be coming out after each session. So we'd like to have your feedback on this session. For any questions about this session or about disability in Wisconsin, please contact us via the email, and that is info, I-N-F-O, at disabilityinwisconsin.org. And disability in Wisconsin is all one word. So thank you again. And I believe that any questions that have been gathered during the chat, those will be sent back out to you, to all the participants.